Hello, welcome to your next lesson. We're continuing on today with resistance to social influence. So we're going to talk about the other explanation for independent behaviour, which we didn't get onto during our live lesson, which is social support. And then we are going to do the evaluation for it. So if you remember, this is where we left off last lesson. And I asked you to complete this 4-mark question. I'm just going to go through what you should have written. So if you get your notes from last lesson, so you can mark it and add any other details that you need. So you should have put something to the effect of, for 1 mark, Sarah is more likely to disobey the coach because she has internal locus of control. This means she's more likely to rely on her own opinions rather than accept information from others. 2 marks. Sarah will also be more likely to be a leader than a follower due to her internal locus of control. She is more likely to resist coercion from her coach or others in her team, so less likely to obey. So all throughout I have made it about Sarah because it's A02, it's a scenario question, it's context, and I've made it clear that it's about obedience as well, so why she is more likely to disobey. And I've given the 3 reasons that we spoke about in last lesson when we talked about Oliner and Oliner study. So she's more likely to rely on her own opinions. So number 1, she's more likely to be a leader than a follower, and she's more likely to resist coercion. So that would have got you 4 marks. You could have also only given me 2 marks, 2 marks worth about Sarah, and then also spoken about Amelia and what kind of locus of control she has. Your starter for today's lesson is to do 2 columns, internal and external locus of control, and then add maybe just 1 or 2 phrases into each of the columns, but have a look at them all and think about which one they would go into. Okay, so you could have had, for internal, phrases such as, no, I'm not a killjoy, I just don't want another drink, I've had plenty already. So people are less likely to conform to other people doing things because they tend to rely more on their own opinions and they tend to be the leaders rather than the followers. I don't care what my teacher says, I'm not doing cross country at the weekend, I'm going to get to the top. So it's this idea that you're in control of your own destiny, your own actions. I've never had a problem passing exams. I'm fortunate that I'm bright, but I always work hard too. If you have strong internal locus of control, you're more likely to put in work because you rely less on external factors to bring you success. And if you fail a test, such as your driving test, then you're more likely to blame it on yourself rather than say, oh, well, the driving instructor was probably just in a bad mood. With external, it's things like not voting because you don't really see the point. We lost a domino game, we were just so unlucky in the tiles we got. So you're not blaming it on your own ability to play domino. You're blaming it on the pieces that you've got. My parents brought me up not to question what I'm told and to do, and I respect that. You kind of just go along with the outside influences. Things like taking a lucky mascot into exams, that's external. Do you think that's going to have an effect on your success? You'll believe that you're just unlucky, and no matter how hard you try at something, you are just going to be unlucky if you have external locus of control. Okay, so the other explanation for independent behaviour was social support, and it is something that we've looked at when we looked at Milgram and Ash's variations. What I want you to do in a minute is to click off this video and follow the link that I've put on Teams on the assignment to watch this video, because I want you to tell me what happens to the rate of conformity when the real participant is given a partner. So watch the YouTube clip and then answer the question, and then you can come back to this video once you're done. So in that variation, the rate of conformity dropped to just 5%. So having social support meant that people were way less likely to conform. And remember, in Ash's study, to conform meant that they gave the wrong answer because the Confederates were saying that the line, the target line, matched the wrong line. So to conform meant give the wrong answer. Also, research support for obedience is one of Milgram's variation, where the real participant was one of three teachers. So they were all in the same room, and at some point while they were given the electric shocks, the two other teachers, who were actors, they were Confederates, refused to continue. So what do you think would have happened to the level of obedience in this case? Yes, it did also decrease. It decreased to 10% from 65%. So quite a large drop. Okay, so now we're going to look at 5 scenarios, and using your knowledge of social support and locus of control, I want you to explain why the person in each case study resisted social pressure. And you could get a question like this in an exam. So an exam could give you a little scenario and say, explain, using your knowledge of resistance to social influence, explain why Joseph or Sam or Kate resisted social pressure. And you would have to say either social support or locus of control, or sometimes both. So number one, Joseph always wears his staff ID, despite the fact that most members of staff do not wear their staff ID. So just pause me now and have a think about that. Why do you think Joseph does that? What does he possess that makes him likely to resist social pressure? So it's likely that Joseph has high internal locus of control. He does what he thinks is correct. He doesn't follow other people, and he's not likely to conform um, to other people not wearing ID badges. The next one is Sam. So nearly everyone in Sam's year started wearing these Adidas trainers, but Sam refused to buy himself a pair, especially when his best friend didn't either. He quite liked the look of them, but decided not to follow the trend. So pause me and have a think. So initially, you could say that he has internal locus of control because even though everybody else was wearing them, he was not conforming, so he had high internal locus of control. However, the fact that his best friend didn't meant that he had social support, which meant also that he was less likely to conform. Kate decides to attend 2 Easter workshops with Tutor to You, despite the fact that none of her friends are attending. Kate believes that her hard work with all her revision will pay off and she will get the A grade due to her work. Pause me and have a think. Which explanation fits into here? So this again is internal locus of control. It's not social support because her friends aren't attending. So Kate obviously has high internal locus of control because she believes she's in control of her destiny, and she's going to put in the work internally to get that A grade. Fatima was at a party with her friends. They met a new group of people who seemed really fun. Later on, they all went outside to smoke, and Fatima was offered a cigarette. Fatima and her friend declined the offer. So pause me and have a think about that one. So this would be social support. Maybe if Fatima's friend hadn't have been there, then maybe she would have smoked. And the last one is Ola. Ola started going to a spinning class where the fitness instructor always wears pink. After a few weeks, Ola noticed that most of the other girls in the class also started wearing pink. She loves the colour pink but decided not to wear pink like the other girls. So this is a case of conformity. What explanation of resistance to social influence fits here? So it wouldn't be social support again, because if it was, then she would be wearing pink, because she would think it was the right thing to do and easier to do because everybody else was doing it. So this is she's got high internal locus of control. She's not likely to be a leader. she's likely to resist coercion from others, even though she felt the pressure to wear pink. Okay, so we're moving on to our evaluation now, and thinking back to last lesson, Oliner and Oliner's study of the interviews that they did with the rescuers of the Jewish people from the Nazi concentration camps. How does that study, and look back in your notes if you don't remember, how does that study support locus of control? Pause me now and I want you to think about it. So they found that individuals with an internal locus of control were more likely to resist pressures to obey. They didn't obey the Nazis and they thought for themselves. And this is what they did. You already have this in your notes. They did compare the rescuers with 126 other people, and the rescuers did have higher internal locus of control than the other 126 who didn't help them. So these results appear to support the idea that a high internal locus of control makes individuals less likely to follow orders. So this is research support that suggests that locus of control affects how obedient you are. And then we have another research support, but this time for conformity. So Spector found that individuals with an internal locus of control were less likely to conform, just as Ash found. You can also use Ash as your research support. He used Rotter's locus of control. Rotter is the guy who came up with locus of control, to determine whether locus of control is associated with conformity. So he looked at 157 students and he found that individuals with a high internal locus of control were less likely to conform than those with high external locus of control, but only in situations of normative social influence. So normative, remember, is when you want to be accepted, you don't want to be rejected by a group. However, there was no difference between the two groups when it was about informational social influence. So when someone was looking for a correct answer, locus of control didn't really affect it in that case. This suggests that normative social influence, the desire to fit in, is more power than informational social influence, the desire to be right, when considering locus of control. Basically, what it's saying is that those with internal locus of control will not conform in normative social influence situations, such as dressing a certain way or smoking or drinking, just because people are doing it, but they may conform to informational social influence. So like in class when someone gives an answer and you conform to that because you think it's right. Whereas external locus of control would probably conform to both. Okay, now we're looking at obedience. So I want you to think, how do Milgram and Asher's studies support the explanation of resistance to social influence through social support? And I want you to write this down because you should remember this because we've just gone through it. So have a go at just writing a brief sentence or two about how Milgram and Asher's studies support the explanation of social support. So Ash found in the variation that we just spoke about where another Confederate gave the correct answer, that the conformity dropped from 33% to 5% average conformity rate. This demonstrates that if the real participant has support for their belief, they are less likely, then they are more likely, sorry, that doesn't make sense, to resist the pressure to conform. So having someone else there give the correct answer was really important for rates of conformity dropping. And then Milgram, in his variation, he had two additional participants who they were Confederates, but the participant thought that they were other participants, and they dropped out midway through. And then in this case, it was less likely for people to go all the way to 450 volts. Only 10% did, rather than 65%. So it's a huge decrease. which just demonstrates again the importance of having social support and how that will affect how much people obey. Okay, so sorry, my last task for you is I don't want you to write this, so don't worry. I want you to plan this. So the question is, two psychology students were discussing the topic of social influence. I find it fascinating how some people are able to resist social influence, said Jack. It must be the result of having a confident personality. I disagree, replied Sarah. I think resisting social influence depends much more on the presence of others. So this essay asks you to discuss two explanations of resistance to social influence. Discuss means to outline and evaluate. Outline is your A01, evaluate is your A03. As part of your discussion, refer to the views expressed by Jack and Sarah in the conversations above. So it's also A02 because it's context and you want to include things from the scenario in your question. So therefore, it's the following format. 6A01, and your 6A01 would be describing the two explanations for resistance to social influence. So you'd describe locus of control for 3A01 marks, and you would describe social support for 3A01 marks. And then you have 4A02 marks. So then you just have a small paragraph with 4 lines talking about the scenario and how it's showing resistance to social influence. And then as your discussion, you have 6 AO3 marks. Obviously, you usually have 10, but in this case, because there's AO2, those 4 marks are being taken off. So it's 6 AO3. So that equates to 3 peels. So 3 evaluation points. And I want you to plan what you would put for your point, for your evidence, and for your explanation, just briefly, and write that up into your notes. There is also more evaluation if you don't want to use the one that I've showed you this lesson. There are plenty more evaluations in your textbooks on page 31, I think it is. There's 3 for locus of control and 3 for social support, so have a look at those as well. As always, any questions, let me know. Please upload your notes onto Teams, so if you just click on assignments, go into submit button and then attach it as an image or a file or a Word document. And yep, any questions, let me know and I'll speak to you soon.